On November 8, 2011, a man who had spent nearly 3 decades turning his personality into a career, his weight into a brand, and his Jamaican-American upbringing into a musical language that nobody else had quite managed to speak before him collapsed outside his Beverly Hills home and was taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead. He was 44 years old. The cause, confirmed 49 days later by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, was pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that had formed in a deep vein and traveled to his heart and then his lungs. The man was Dwight Arrington Myers, known to the world as Heavy D, and the tragedy of his death at 44 is not primarily the story of a blood clot or a long-haul flight or a body that carried more weight than was sustainable. It is the story of a man who built an entire public identity around aspects of himself that were simultaneously his greatest creative asset and the source of a private vulnerability he spent most of his adult life managing quietly, while the world watched the performance and never fully saw what it was costing him. Dwight Myers was born on May 24, 1967, in Mandeville, Jamaica, and did not move to the United States until the early 1970s, when his family relocated to the Mount Vernon area of New York. The musical environment he absorbed in Jamaica before that move, the dancehalls, the reggae, the ska, the rocksteady, formed a foundational layer of his musical sensibility that would eventually give his work a texture and warmth that distinguished him from the artists around him. By the time he was navigating the New York hip-hop landscape as a teenager, he had a musical vocabulary considerably wider than most of his contemporaries, and the combination of Jamaican rhythm and New York rap sensibility was something he would spend years finding a way to express in a form that could carry both without diminishing either. The hip-hop world of the mid-1980s was not short of competition. The Fat Boys, Run DMC, LL Cool J, Eric B. and Rakim, and Doug E. Fresh were all operating at a high level. Making space for something new and genuinely different required not just talent but a specific kind of confidence, and Heavy D had that confidence in abundance from the beginning. In 1986, he was signed to Uptown Records by the label's founder Andre Harrell, not as a solo act but as the lead of Heavy D and the Boys, becoming the first act that Harrell signed to the label. The debut album Living Large arrived in 1987, introducing a style that blended hip-hop, R&B, reggae, and the beginnings of what would become New Jack Swing, a movement Heavy D would help define across the late 1980s and early 1990s. The album produced hit singles including Mr. Big Stuff and Chunky But Funky and established the persona that would carry through everything he did: warm, playful, confident, unashamed, and genuinely funny in a way that most hip-hop of that era was not built to accommodate. He was not performing insecurity or aggression. He was performing joy, and audiences found it immediately appealing. He called himself the overweight lover and built the phrase into something more complex than a self-deprecating joke. It was a declaration that the conventional requirements of attractiveness in American entertainment did not apply to him, and that his size was not a qualifier on his charm but a simple fact about who he was. Among the people who moved through Uptown Records in those early years was a young student from Howard University who was working as a promoter and throwing parties while hungry for something larger. Sean Combs had the specific quality that Heavy D recognized in people with real potential: absolute determination combined with a willingness to do whatever the work required. Heavy D was instrumental in helping Combs gain access to the music industry infrastructure that would eventually allow him to build his own label and career. The relationship between them was documented consistently across their careers, and Combs's acknowledgement of what Heavy D meant to his own trajectory was among the most prominent expressions of grief after Heavy D's death. The record that arrived after Living Large carried a very different emotional register. Peaceful Journey, released in 1991, was created in the shadow of the death of Troy Dixon, known as Trouble T. Roy, a dancer and crew member with Heavy D and the Boys who died in 1990 after falling from a stage at a concert in Indianapolis during a performance in July of that year. He was 22 years old. The loss of someone that young, someone who had been traveling alongside him through the years of building a career, produced a shift in Heavy D's music that was audible to anyone paying attention. The album contained hit singles including Now That We Found Love, but the emotional center of the project was a song that paid tribute to Trouble T. Roy, a track written and performed by Pete Rock and CL Smooth called They Reminisce Over You. Heavy D was the emotional impetus for the song, which became one of the most celebrated and enduring tributes in hip-hop history, and the fact that it existed at all was testament to the specific quality of loss that Trouble T. Roy's death represented to the people who had known him. The professional accomplishments of the early 1990s were genuinely remarkable. A guest appearance on Janet Jackson's single All Right became one of the earliest prominent examples of a rapper appearing on a mainstream pop record, and the song peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1990. 2 years later, Michael Jackson included Heavy D on the single Jam, from the Dangerous album, expanding the reach of that particular collaboration across the global audience that followed Jackson's work. Both appearances demonstrated something important about Heavy D's specific appeal. He could move through different musical environments and different commercial contexts without losing the essential quality of his presence. He was not modifying himself to fit the spaces he was entering. He was bringing himself into those spaces and finding that they accommodated him. His career extended beyond music into television and film across the 1990s and into the 2000s. He sang the theme song for the Fox sketch comedy series In Living Color and for MAD-TV. He took acting roles in television productions including Living Single and Boston Public, and played the recurring character Sid Shapiro on the crime drama Bones. The movement from music into entertainment was a natural extension for someone whose performing presence had always been built on personality as much as craft. He was interested in the full range of what entertainment could offer, and pursued it with the same confidence he had brought to every other aspect of his career. Through all of this, he was managing health challenges that he consistently minimized in public, keeping his difficulties close rather than allowing them to become part of the narrative that the media and his audience constructed around him. He had treated pneumonia and other cardiac-related concerns without making them subjects of public discussion. The ethos he had absorbed from his environment, the hip-hop culture of the 1980s and 1990s in which showing weakness was a professional liability, combined with his own apparent preference for projecting confidence rather than vulnerability, created an environment in which the people around him did not have a complete picture of what he was managing. His personal trainer at the Ultra Body Fitness gym in Los Angeles, a man named Tony, later revealed that in the months before his death, Heavy D had been actively working on a fitness plan designed to reduce his weight significantly, and that this was not the first time they had worked together toward that goal. Tony stated that he had helped Heavy D lose approximately 135 pounds in an earlier effort. In 2011, they had drafted a 3-month training regimen with the intention of reducing his weight further. Heavy D died before that regimen could produce its intended results. In October 2011, approximately a month before his death, Heavy D appeared at the BET Hip Hop Awards alongside longtime collaborator Eddie F., sharing a stage for what would be the first televised performance they had done together in approximately 15 years. The performance was received warmly by an audience that had not seen that particular combination of people on stage in over a decade, and it carried the quality of a reconnection with something that had mattered to a generation of hip-hop fans. For the people in the room and the people watching at home, it looked like a beginning rather than an ending. 28 days later, he collapsed outside his Beverly Hills home. The official account of what happened was provided by Craig Harvey, the chief coroner investigator for the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, who stated that the blood clot responsible for Heavy D's pulmonary embolism was most likely formed during an extended airplane ride. Heavy D had recently traveled from London to Los Angeles on a long-haul flight, and the conditions of extended immobility on a long flight are well documented as a risk factor for deep vein thrombosis, the formation of blood clots in the deep veins, typically of the leg. When those clots break free and travel to the lungs, the resulting pulmonary embolism can be rapidly fatal. The official cause of death, confirmed 49 days after his collapse, was pulmonary embolism. Pneumonia was listed as a contributing factor in his health decline. What the coroner's findings confirmed, and what the coverage in the days and weeks following his death gradually made explicit, was that his weight had been a significant factor in his susceptibility to the conditions that killed him. Obesity is a well-established risk factor for deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism. The combination of extended immobility on a long flight, pre-existing cardiovascular and pulmonary conditions, and the elevated baseline risk associated with his weight created a situation in which a medical event that many people survive became fatal. The irony embedded in this reality was painful for anyone who had followed his career and understood the complicated relationship between his public identity and his private health. He had named himself the overweight lover. He had turned his size into a brand element, a declaration of confidence in an entertainment environment that consistently pressured performers toward a narrower physical standard. The courage in that choice was genuine. The weight that made the choice courageous was also the weight that shortened his life. In the years since his death, the tributes that arrived confirmed the scale of his influence across hip-hop and popular music broadly. Eminem referenced Heavy D on the 2013 track Rap God, name-checking Chunky but Funky in a lyric that placed Heavy D in direct proximity to the central lineage of hip-hop artistry. Nicki Minaj, Erykah Badu, and Sean Combs were among the artists who spoke publicly about what his influence had meant to their own careers and to the culture they had all come up in. The artists whose careers Heavy D had supported and mentored, the people he had pointed toward opportunities and connected to industry infrastructure, were numerous and spread across the full span of hip-hop's development through the 1990s and 2000s. He left a daughter, Z Myers, born in 2000 from his relationship with celebrity chef Antonia LaFaso. The relationship between Heavy D and LaFaso was a well-known element of his personal life during those years, and Z Myers has spoken publicly about her father in the years since his death, describing a person whose warmth and humor and capacity for love were consistent regardless of the version of himself he was presenting to the public on any given day. She was 11 years old when he died. What the full account of Heavy D's life and death reveals, when assembled from its documented components, is not a simple cautionary tale about the dangers of a particular lifestyle or the inevitable consequences of carrying too much weight. It is more complicated and more human than that. He was a person who had built an identity partly around refusing to be defined by the conventional expectations of his physical appearance, and who did that genuinely rather than as a defensive posture. The confidence he projected was real. The creative talent that carried him from Mandeville, Jamaica, through the streets of Mount Vernon, New York, and into a career that touched the lives of artists across 2 generations of hip-hop was real. The health challenges he managed privately, without making them the central story of his public life, were also real, and the fact that he chose not to make them central did not prevent them from being consequential. His personal trainer's account of the fitness work they had been doing together in 2011 suggests a man who was aware of the need to address what his weight was doing to his body, and who was taking practical steps toward that goal in the months before his death. That combination of awareness and action, combined with the abruptness of the event that ended his life before any of it could have the effect he was working toward, is one of the more painful elements of the story. He knew. He was working on it. It was not enough time. The decision to build a public identity around the overweight lover persona was both creatively brave and commercially strategic, and it served him well across the peak years of his career. It opened space in hip-hop for a kind of performer that the genre had not previously made room for, and it allowed him to approach his work from a position of apparent self-acceptance that made his music feel warmer and more welcoming than much of what surrounded it. The cost of that identity, the degree to which the brand required him to maintain a certain posture toward his own physical reality regardless of what that reality was actually doing to him, is visible only in retrospect. Heavy D was 44 years old when he died. The age is its own commentary on what was lost, because 44 is not the age at which a career like his should have ended. There was more music to be made, more collaborations to pursue, more of the specific kind of joy he brought to everything he worked on to be delivered to audiences who had been responding to it for nearly 3 decades. The BET Hip Hop Awards performance with Eddie F. 1 month before his death suggested a person who was still interested in what came next and who had not finished with the work. He had not finished with it. The work finished with him.